Why, hello, friends. Happy Thursday. And welcome to those of you joining me live. Some of you may be taking your social studies test, so maybe watching later. If you haven't taken your social studies test, as soon as I'm done reading today, you want to go ahead and jump on the link. Remember, it closes at 1 o'clock, so you don't want to start it any later than 12, just to be sure, because if you're in the middle of the test, it'll just shut it down and mark everything else wrong. Just got back from a puppy walk, so I'm in my walking around the neighborhood gear. And what else? Oh, tomorrow we are doing a Kahoot on by the Great Hornspoon with both classes. After the Kahoot, Miss Nogdave's class, I'm going to ask you guys to log out of the Zoom, and then I'm going to do a chapter by the Great Hornspoon with my class, since they'll be behind a chapter because I'm doing a chapter with Miss Nogdave's class this afternoon at 1. So once again, everybody show up tomorrow, 1 o'clock for Kahoot. After Kahoot, Miss Nogdave's class is going to log out, and Miss Cummins' class is going to stay, and we're going to catch up with the other class. With that being said, we are on spoiled potatoes. Captain Swain just did a tricky move and went through the Strait of Magellan instead of going around Cape Horn and cut off a bunch of time, and now they are in front of the Sea Raven. They're heading up the west coast of South America towards California. Lady Wilma is in the lead currently, but that could change. All right, let's do this. Chapter 6, Spoiled Potatoes. Day after day, the two gold ships beat their way north along the ragged coast of Chile. Black smoke boiled up from their funnels, and headwinds spun it out into long streamers. Jack sat on a keg, and Praiseworthy stood over him with a pair of scissors. The boy's hair had shot up like broom straw during the long passage through the strait, and Praiseworthy had no intention of letting it grow any longer. "Hold still." "I am holding still," said Jack, as still as I can, at least. Praiseworthy snipped away. "You'll be a young man before your Aunt Arabella sees you again, and may she forgive me, you're getting your height like a sapling." "Praiseworthy," said Jack, "do you really think we'll strike it rich?" "No doubt about it." The wind carried away snips of yellow hair. "Maybe all the gold nuggets will be dug up before we get there." "Nonsense, there'll be enough for all." But in the privacy of his thoughts, Praiseworthy didn't believe for a moment that they would be stubbing their toes on big lumps of gold. Still, he must see to it that young Master Jack did indeed strike it rich. It would not do to return to Boston without a sack or two of treasure. Why, some of the passengers had brought along chests and boxes to be filled with nuggets and gold dust. As Praiseworthy clipped away, passengers stood around watching and offering advice. Even a haircut broke the monotony of those endless days at sea. "Needs a little more of a snip on the old port side," said Dr. Buckbee, who had thrown away his alarm trumpet and regained his good humor. "Nah," said Mountain Jim. "Work them shears along the starboard beam over there, Praiseworthy. That's where it wants some evening up a mite." A shout from the lookout drew everyone's attention to the Sea Raven astern. "She stopped making smoke, Captain." Smoke had indeed stopped billowing from her funnel. Captain Swain came out on deck and gave the ship a squint. "Her coal bunkers are empty," he said. "She went around the Horn. We saved fuel slipping through the strait, but we're not in much better shape ourselves, gentlemen. If this wind doesn't turn around, we'll be burning our last lump of coal soon enough." By the end of the day, the Sea Raven slipped entirely from view behind the horizon. Praiseworthy took no comfort from the Lady Wilma's lead. "It's the end of the race that counts," he said again. The wind didn't turn around. It died away completely. The Lady Wilma was able to keep steam up in her boiler for almost a week. One day grew warmer, then the next, and soon the gold seekers were peeling off coats and sweaters. Hold on a second. My gardener's outside my window making a lot of noise. Let me close the window. Really, such timing. Sorry about that. Mr. Carl was out there making tons of noise. All right, where am I? Jack shucked off his shoes and took to climbing the ratlines. The tarred hemp ladder stretched up to the mast tops, wearing a stocking cap the first mate had given him. He would spend hours in the crow's nest seeing the world. There were times when he felt he could see almost to California. The day came when the last shovelful of coal was scraped out of the bins. The boiler fire burned out. The merry thrash and throb of the side wheels ceased, and the Lady Wilma sat becalmed, meaning no wind, no fuel. Day after day, the gold ship languished on the sea, waiting for a good wind to fill her canvas. A week passed, two, and then fresh water in the tanks got dangerously low, and Captain Swain ordered for it to be rationed for drinking only. From the crow's nest, Jack looked down on the gold seekers wandering the decks like caged men. One day, Praiseworthy came up the ratlines, bowler hat, umbrella and all, and they watched for whales just to pass the time. It's almost like they're on quarantine on their boat. Is Aunt Arabella an old maid? Jack asked solemnly. An old maid, replied Praiseworthy. He leaned his chin on the hook of his umbrella. Your Aunt Arabella is a young and beautiful woman. Is it because of my sisters and me? Is what because of your dear sisters and you? I mean, if she didn't have us to bring up, maybe she would have gotten married a long time ago? The butler dismissed the thought. Stuff and nonsense. Sarah said once it was because of us that she never got married. Dear Miss Sarah is mistaken. I have no doubt that your Aunt Arabella is merely waiting for the right gentleman to come along, and I dare say he'll be delighted to gain two fine nieces and a stalwart young nephew like yourself. Constance said that Aunt Arabella was in love once, but he died, and she never got over it. Dear Miss Constance is mistaken again, I'm sure, Praiseworthy replied softly. No, let's have no more of this talk. Look there, aren't those sharks? Sharks they were, and Mountain Jim, who was fishing, caught one. He called for the cook, and Mr. Azariah Jones gasped, You're not going to eat that thing, are you? I sure am, answered Mountain Jim. If he had the chance, he'd eat me, wouldn't he? Another week passed, and Mr. Azariah Jones' 18-barrel of potatoes began to spoil down in the hold. I'm ruined, he wailed, pacing the hot decks. His heavy face hung slack under a large straw hat. Nonsense, said Praiseworthy out for a stroll. I'm a poor, poor man, groaned the Yankee trader. I had every cent I own in those potatoes. I tell you, I'm ruined. Then you must sell them, replied the butler, who wished only to be of service. Sell spoiled potatoes? My good friend, it's clear that you know nothing about trade. Not a thing. Who do you think will buy these things? I haven't the faintest idea, said Praiseworthy. That's only because I haven't given the matter any thought. It was a naughty problem, even for Praiseworthy. The next day, the French immigrant, Monsieur Gaunt, could be seen pacing the decks in one direction, while Mr. Azariah Jones paced in the other. Mon Dieu, declared the Frenchman, I'm ruined. My grape cuttings are drying up, and the captain will not give me a drop of fresh water to keep them alive. I'm ruined. Well, then you must water them, said Praiseworthy. Water them? Exclaimed the Frenchman. Water them, you say? With what, monsieur? Why, with water, replied the butler. The Frenchman shook his head. I have 50 gold pieces in my money belt, but 1,000 gold pieces will not buy me a drop of fresh water on this ship. We must find a way, said Praiseworthy. Fresh water and coal lay waiting 1,000 miles further north at the port of Callao on the coast of Peru, but the Lady Wilma seemed rooted to one spot, becalmed and completely motionless. All that day, Praiseworthy racked his brain. Fine men, Monsieur Gaunt and Mr. Azariah Jones, the butler told himself, and something must be done to help them. But even if a stiff wind came up, the gold ship could hardly make port soon enough to save the grape cuttings, and not even in Callao. Praiseworthy supposed could he find a buyer for 18 barrels of spoiled potatoes. Indeed, Master Jack, said Praiseworthy, I seem to be a failure in my first attempt at both trade and agriculture. I suppose we should at the very least reimburse Mr. Azariah Jones for the few raw potatoes we helped ourselves to as stowaways. Suddenly Jack's eyebrows shot up. A thought bolted through him like lightning. He was unable to speak for a full 3 seconds. Praiseworthy! That's it! He exclaimed. That's what? You've got it! Got what? At that moment, Mr. Azariah Jones came pacing down the deck from one direction, while Monsieur Gaunt came pacing down from the other. Jack quickly explained, and Praiseworthy's eyes instantly lit up. Gentlemen, said the butler, holding up his umbrella to stop the Yankee trader and the Frenchman, Master Jack here tells me I have hit upon a marvelous notion. Why, it's so simple, a boy could have thought of it. What's this? Asked Mr. Azariah Jones, his hands clasped hopelessly behind his back. Monsieur Gaunt, said Praiseworthy, as your agriculture advisor, I suggest that you buy Mr. Azariah Jones 18 barrels of potatoes. They're a bit spoiled, but a very good bargain. Potatoes, exclaimed the Frenchman. Don't make jokes, monsieur. It's no joke, I assure you, said Praiseworthy. Confound it, Praiseworthy, grumbled the Yankee trader. No one's going to pay me for my spoiled potatoes. Nonsense, said the butler. Spoiled the potatoes may be, but juicy they are, sir. Master Jack can attest to that. Why, they're like fat raindrops inside those brown skins. Monsieur Gaunt, you need only poke each of your grape cuttings into a plump potato. I dare say they will stay alive all the way to Callao. The Frenchman and the Yankee trader stood facing each other in the sun, and broad smiles crept over their slack, gloomy faces. I'll buy your potatoes, exclaimed Monsieur Gaunt. I'll sell my potatoes, exclaimed Mr. Azariah Jones. I'm saved, said one. I'm saved, said the other. And the bargain was struck right there on the spot. Jack remained silent, but stuck his hands in his pockets and felt proud of himself. Why, if he hadn't been a stowaway, if he hadn't slacked his thirst with the potatoes at hand, why, some future hillside would be left without a vineyard. Gentlemen, said Mr. Azariah Jones, beaming at Praiseworthy and Jack, you'll need a few tools in the gold fields. When we reach Callao, I'm going to buy you the best pick and shovel to be had. On the contrary, corrected the Frenchman, it is I who will buy the best pick and shovel in Callao, in all of Peru. With that, Monsieur Gaunt hurried to the hold and busied himself with a jackknife. He cut holes into the potatoes and slipped in his grape cuttings like little straws. The next morning, a wind from the south came up, and the Lady Wilma's canvas swelled out in great big white billows. A happy shout went up, and the ship began to move through the sea. For days after that, Mr. Azariah Jones stopped anyone who would listen to say, Remarkable pair, Praiseworthy, and that little lad. Born traders, you know. Imagine finding a buyer for 18 barrels of spoiled potatoes. Snapping winds drove the gold ship into even warmer latitudes. Soon the Argonauts were down to shirt sleeves again, and a growing excitement took hold of them, as if they could smell the land in the air. Men began to trim their beards and wash their clothes. Callao stood just 10 days ahead. In his stocking cap, Jack was taking on the aspect of a young sailor. The salt air and the wind had toughened his face. His eyes narrowed with a look of distance in them. He wandered higher and higher into the riggings, exploring the mysterious aloft, the foot ropes, the shrouds, and the blocks. More than once, the boatswain, a bantam with a voice like a frog's, chased him down, but it was like trying to keep a boy out of a tree. Hanging onto the yardarm, Jack was the first to notice a white speck on the horizon behind the Lady Wilma. The speck grew into sails, the sails grew into a ship, and the ship turned out to be the Sea Raven. She's gaining on us, shouted Mountain Jim. By noon, the Sea Raven was alongside, skimming lightly over the seas. The wind seemed to pick her up and carry her along like a feather. Blast! Roared Captain Swain. And me half sunk in the water with building bricks. Bricks! I've a notion to dump them all overboard. By dusk, the Sea Raven was gone, beyond the horizon, far ahead of the Lady Wilma. So I told you it ain't over till it's over, right? And remember, when the race finishes, that's just part 1 of the book. And then it's the race to the gold. That's part 2. And then part 3 is, if they get gold, can they get back to the East Coast and get the money to Aunt Arabella before she loses her house? So a couple things I wanted to debrief you on. Number 1, Jack asks if Aunt Arabella is an old maid. And it's kind of a funny terminology, which we don't use anymore, and it's actually quite rude. But back in the olden days, if you weren't married and didn't have kids by a certain age, like 30 or so, you were considered an old maid, that nobody would want to marry you because it was harder for you to have children. So it wasn't really a nice term, but if you weren't married by 30-ish, then most men considered you an old maid and they were looking for a younger wife. Nowadays, that's not the case because women are getting pregnant in their 40s and whatnot. So not a very nice term, but Jack must have heard it from somewhere. So that's kind of where that comes from. And sorry that my French accent and my English accent and my American accent, they all kind of blend together at some points. Kind of makes me laugh. All right, guys, you know what to do. Don't forget to answer your questions inside your journal and also do your miner's log, making sure to mix it up. Praiseworthy sometimes, Jack other times. If you're Miss Nogdave's class, I will see you at 1 o'clock today for our classroom Zoom. And please bring your book, please bring your journal. We will be reading together. And once again, don't forget to do your social studies test. Your parents have the link, and I believe it's also posted on Teams. Have a wonderful Thursday, and I will see you all tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Oh, no, sorry. Let me think. 1 o'clock today with Miss Nogdave's class. Tomorrow, I'll be reading a chapter for everyone at 11. And then at 1 o'clock, everyone together will be Kahoot. And then my class will stay to read an extra chapter to catch up. All right. That's complicated. Don't worry. I'll keep reminding you. All right. Have a good one. Bye.